Hello, welcome to our Yoga for the Creative Soul book club today as we carry forth through chapter 5, the chapter on fear. If you were playing along at home, you might have done some of the asana practice that spans pages 73 to 77, or even 78 if you're counting the relaxation in there, which I recommend you do count the relaxation in there. An intentional practice for courage. And, we need to be careful with our yoga that we aren't prescriptive about which poses do what, that we trust ourselves, and also we bring our own intention to the shapes that the body is making in order to understand what effect is this having on my physiology, breath, energy, beliefs, and in what ways is this connecting me to a unified consciousness or those divine and shared qualities or virtues. And that quest for unitive consciousness, that is a definition of yoga, and that is what this path was about as it was practiced even 5,000 years ago in India. Before we get rolling today, I want to acknowledge that we are meeting today and privileged to live, work, and create on lands that were originally cared for by their original peoples, and through treaty, theft, or occupation have been taken over by others. I want to acknowledge our responsibility to join forces with those original caretakers and their ancestors as we become the ancestors for future generations as caregivers of these lands, airs, and waterways. You can visit native-land.ca to find the names of the original caretakers in your area. There's a map of the world there, native-land.ca. Now, today we're embarking on a two-part journey. So we've done this a few times in this chapter because fear, this klesha, or this obstacle to our peace of mind that we're identifying as fear of death or change, is it's simultaneously deep and subtle and also obvious, that it very much comes into play in our lives. And in Yoga for the Creative Soul, I acknowledge a voice of fear within us as the naysaying voice, or voices, the naysayer. This is sometimes called the inner critic, the saboteur. They might be the voices of our old teachers, caregivers, authority figures, but they are very easily assimilated, especially in a society that has used shame as a basis for shaping children's behavior. So we wind up with these naysayers, with these voices of obstacles, shame and fear within us. And this next practice that we're going to do is a mask practice. It's a mask practice. So when you come next time, you can even bring materials that would let you make a mask, like you used to do maybe in nursery school, where you'd have a paper plate and you'd staple a string around the back of it, and then your paper plate could be your mask. So when we do part 2 next week, you can think of bringing those things, but even thicker paper, cardboard, construction paper, cardstock, I meant actually, or construction paper that sometimes we have just lying around our houses will work, but regular old piece of paper will work as well. And I want to take us through some movement today, a bit of free movement, and then a little guided relaxation. so that we can play with part one of this, which is going to be making the mask of that naysayer, of that fearful voice within us. So let's start by going to our practice space or nearby space where you have a bit of room to move, and just kind of wander around and warm up a little bit, arm circles, getting your balance on one leg and rotating at the hip, you know, swinging one leg around, or maybe doing knee circles in one direction and then knee circles in another direction while you're standing. So we're getting the arms and legs warmed up through some circular action. And it's true, if you're doing one-legged standing and doing knee circles, it challenges balance, but it's challenging balance in this really lovely way where your stabilizers and proprioceptors are needing to continually be sensing the environment. How can I stay stable while I am moving? And that comes in handy, especially as we continue to age and falling becomes more and more dangerous for us to do these little practices to keep the stabilizers online, to keep us more adaptive in our ever-changing environments. We're building strength and safety into the body. And then once you've gotten through some arm circles in both directions and with both arms, and some leg circles, both directions, both legs, start to play with dynamic side bends. And maybe you want to widen your base, or maybe you even want to come into a horse stance or a goddess base to bring a bit more strength through your legs. And they're just kind of flowing side to side. You don't need to keep the pace that I'm demonstrating. Maybe you want to slow that down a little bit, or even link it with your breath, where if we're linking with breath, deepening the breath, it's a lot slower, isn't it? And it gives you a bit more time to explore. So however you want to play with those dynamic side bending actions, whatever you want that base to be, trust that. Yeah. And then we'll bring the legs back in line with the hips, and maybe holding opposite elbow and opposite hand behind you, or reverse namaste back there, or just keeping your arms straight and clasping your fingers in the back. Feel yourself broadening, starting right at the pelvis and just creating a little more space between pubic bone and belly button, and between belly button and lowest rib, and then thinking of expanding the rib cage, a little more space between the intercostals in the front of the body, imagining the fused bones of the sternum and the sternum actually opening a little bit, hollow of the throat, larynx, pushing the chin forward. Yes, that's it, forward and up, opening, rolling the shoulder blades together. The action in the back is to shorten things while the front of the body is opening, spaciousness. And then coming back to center, noticing what you feel from that opening back bend. And then going in the opposite direction and curling it all forward, chin to chest, and each set of vertebrae, one at a time, rolling down into a standing forward bend. Protecting your low back if necessary by letting the knees stay soft, or even quite deeply bending the knees. So we're aiming to have those hip bones come down towards the top of the thighs. So there's movement happening in the pelvis as well. You know, sometimes you'll see the pelvis stays stuck and then the arch is just in the lower back. So we want the lower back curling forward, but the pelvis curling forward as well. Asterisk, hands not showing proper anatomy. It's terrible, terrible depiction, but if you get that point of aiming those hips towards the top of the thighs, and that your knees, depending on your flexibility, often do need to bend to make that happen. And then roll it back up with the strength of your core supporting your back, or even climbing the hands up the legs if you need that support. one spine bone at a time, stacking yourself back up tall. And once you're tall and straight, let those arms come right up overhead and create length from the soles of your feet to the top of your head and to the fingertips. So the neck stays long, arms are reaching out of the underarm and intercostal space. Height, space, and then bring it all down to center. Yeah. Feeling your vitality, your aliveness, letting your stance come a little wider for this last movement, and just roll yourself through a twist. You can do this quickly, letting your arms be floppy like empty shirt sleeves. You can do this slowly, maybe even keeping the arms out in a T as you revolve around. Remember, we can always play with the pace of the breath, which really slows it down, even though it's moving. And if you're bringing the rotation all the way through your hips, just make sure you're lifting the opposite heel. So as you're turning right, you lift the left heel. And as you're turning left, you lift the right heel. So that the head of the femur can roll in that hip socket, right? We're not locking up, which would create a twist down through the lower joints. Not quite as safe as we want it to be. And after you've gotten some twisting happening through that backbone, through those muscles, return to center. And from center, come into your physical posture for a little visualization or relaxation. You're welcome to lie down for this in a corpse pose, in a child's pose, on your abdomen in a crocodile, or just return to your seat. And as you settle there into your relaxation posture, feel the way the ground or the furniture holds you. And trust it to hold and support you. Letting go into that comfort and care. Imagine relaxation moving through the body, unwinding tensions in the feet and legs, hips, abdomen, lower back, middle back, upper back, relaxing chest, shoulders, arms, hands. Relaxing neck, throat, head, face. Relaxing the sense organs. Deepening the breath. Creating more space between the thoughts and the feelings. Things slowing down in the mind. Moving to the place of imagination and envisioning your authentic creative self. Imagine yourself in an environment where you feel safe and comfortable. And imagine that creative self exploring that environment. Applying creativity through its inspiration. Dancing or painting. Writing or composing. And as your creative self creates, imagine the presence of the naysayer entering this space as its own entity, not as thoughts and feelings within the creative self, but as something other. Just for now, imagining this as something separate. Those messages of doubt and fear, the messages to stay small, don't try, the voice that criticizes and tears down. Notice the form that this naysayer takes. It might be a human form, but it might be an aspect of nature, a symbol, a glyph, an archetype. And knowing that you are safe, the creative self is safe. Witness this naysayer take shape with a face. Notice the colors, the movement, the expression. Are there sounds, flavors, aromas that go along with the experience of this naysayer? Witnessing and acknowledging all of these things from a place of security. As right now, this voice that is often within, that is often part of your thoughts, perhaps not even acknowledged as other, is separate. Right now it is separate. Right now you are able to observe it more like a scientist from a place of safety, allowing and trusting what appears. You may hear it expressing its messages, or it may be quiet. It's still. Whatever is, allow and continue to observe. And when it feels right for you, when you're ready, bring back movement to the body in the place that your physical form is resting right now. Notice how the movement comes, gently wiggling fingers and toes, rolling head from side to side. If you're reclined, use your hands and arms to help you, easing back to seated, coming to your creative space. If you're using a paper plate, it's already set and rounded. If you're using paper, draw that oval of the face around the page. You can cut it out later. And using whatever materials you have, you can paste images, use glitter glue, pencil crayons, markers, crayons, even tearing up other pieces of paper to give dimension. Express that naysayer by making a mask, depicting its face here on the page. We'll pause the recording to give you time to create that mask, to express the face of that inner saboteur, inner critic, the voice of doubt, the voice of judgment. harshness, limits. And in real time, we'll take 5 or 6 minutes to get started with it, knowing that you can return to it at any time. Creating a mask that represents the naysayer that appeared to you in that visualization. Now, leave yourself as much time as you want to continue placing details on this mask. This is something you can return to over time as you get to know your naysayer a little better. We'll be playing with that more next week, invoking some discernment, because sometimes it's tough to tell what's the authentic voice and what's the naysayer. Is this my intuition, or is this something getting in the way of my intuition? We will play with that a bit more next time. For this time, continue to flesh out that naysayer. You might even give it its own name. Work with it in the week to come. Anytime you hear that voice of self-doubt, remember this mask that you've created and see if you can peel that voice of fear and doubt away from your authentic self. Listen for the quieter voice. You know, the truth is much less insistent. The truth has the luxury of being quite still and quiet because truth is strong. It doesn't need to get noisy and assert itself. It ultimately holds the power. So that's one of the ways we can actually tell if it's our doubt, is if it's noisy. Yeah, so notice that for yourself and in your own ways as the week continues. When we return, we'll work through discernment and a side-by-side comparison of the authentic creative self and the naysayer, continuing to understand those differences even more. We're ultimately doing this in the context of the role that fear plays in our lives. Fear is an obstacle. Fear of death, death of the familiar, fear of changes, fear of transitions. And when we meet again, we'll be at the equinox, a transition from summer to autumn, which can be really triggering for a lot of people. If you're looking for support in dealing with your triggers, keep watching these videos or coming to the book clubs. Reach out to me on social media or through my website. If you're ready to dig in a little bit more to your own personal growth and recovery, I have a trauma-aware training and certification coming up the first weekend in August. We'll be looking at practical ways of meeting those impacts of trauma directly. Here's the impact, here's what we can do about it, and we'll use our yogic tools there. I'm always available to you one-on-one and for your questions, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for attending today.